Welcome to the Financial Freedom Secrets Show. This is your host, Jackson Millan, the Wealth Mentor, helping business owners create financial freedom faster by mastering the language of money. Want to see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom? Complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard at wealthhealthcheck.com.au. That's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. The average score for most business owners is 18 out of 40. So complete the scorecard now and see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom. G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of the Financial Freedom Secrets Show, and I'm very excited for this episode. I've got Nathan Williams with us from Custom Return, and Nathan has a wealth of experience around helping businesses dial in their positioning, build their sales systems, and basically get that goal of being able to grow and scale their business and have these repeat customers who buy from them like crazy. I know this is a big taboo topic. We realize that sales needs to be done in business, but very few business owners really own the role of being a salesperson. If anything, we shy away from it. So I'm hoping to shift some mindsets today. So Nathan, thanks for joining us, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
Mate, pleasure to have you here. Now, mate, give us a little bit of background of your origin story and kind of what got you to where you are now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, long story short, I started my first business when I was 18. That was when I had another body, and because it was a personal training business, so definitely not quite in that shape, Jackson, but that was the initial business. Now I had 3 businesses over the last 30 years. Looked at a Master of Management and Marketing through Macquarie Graduate School of Management, and probably the third and maybe the most crucial part of that story, real quick, is back in 2013, I went in a pitch comp, which freaked me out because I had speech therapy as a kid. Public speaking and pitching, wasn't my natural go-to, and had to pitch to 300 people, a couple of judges, critiquing every single word, and there's 55 in the comp, in the pitch competition, and managed to win it, and just got a big high out of that and really loved that experience. But more than anything, the bigger lesson for me, Jackson, was, you don't get into the sales process and you don't get referrals if your message isn't clear, concise, and compelling. And, also the clarity of the message drives the marketing. So that was a big insight for me. And literally overnight, I pivoted my business to certainly still doing the sales strategy work and referral work. We've got programs around that, but focusing a lot more on the pitch and the messaging up front, because that drives everything from there.
100%. We've even found this ourselves. We've been constantly dialing in our positioning and our messaging. And when you get it, it is rocket fuel for your business. And when you don't get it, it's crickets, right? You could hear a pin drop. And for many business owners, they become the world's best kept secret. So in your experience working with business owners, mate, where do business owners get it wrong most often?
Yeah, certainly. Well, as it relates to pitching or messaging or story, we use those terms interchangeably. 3 sort of big pitch pitfalls that I see on a regular basis, Jackson, are number one, a lack of clarity. And specifically, they think they're being clear because they're the expert and they understand at a level 10 out of 10. So they're up here, but they forget the person they're speaking to, maybe their understanding is more like a level 4 or 5 out of 10. And it's hard because as business owners, it's hard for us to imagine what it was like before we had the level of expertise in our specific domain that we now have. And so I'm always talking to clients about you don't dumb it down, you smart it down. Like, you make it really clear and also make it highly relatable. So whatever problem it is that you solve as the expert, how do they relate to that problem, and put it in terms that they can quickly relate to? So lack of clarity, that's one key thing that the businesses get wrong. A second one is certainly a lack of consistency. So, for example, a lot of people might go to whether it's events on a weekly, fortnightly, monthly basis, whatever it is, and they feel like they've got to change their message every time. I've got to sound smart, I've got to change it up, I've got to come up with something new. And that's a big mistake because, big corporates understand this, that you don't run a single message, you run a sequence of messages. And if you can think more like a corporate and approach it more like a TV, a social media, or a radio ad campaign, think that and remember that people have got to hear or see the same message at least 8 times before they actually start to absorb it. Now, that number could be a lot higher depending on the complexity of what you're selling and who you're selling it to. So lacking consistency is a big challenge. And probably the third one, real quick, Jackson, is not pitching the problems that you solve. So a lot of us get caught up in talking about our solution, the minutiae of what we do, because, hey, we're the experts. So that's really comfortable to talk about our solution. But if we don't preface that by talking about the problems that we solve, then the impact of what we talk about when we come to the solution is lessened. Because there's a thing called the negativity bias, which is simply that people are up to 2 to 3 times more likely to buy to avoid a problem, avoid the stick, rather than just get the solution. So yeah, they're the three big problems I see a lot: lack of clarity, lack of consistency, and not pitching the problems that business solves.
I mean, when you put it that way, it's so common sense. Like thinking about it, I go, yeah, that's an absolute no-brainer. But even myself, I was guilty of not getting these things right. And it's always 2020 vision in hindsight, right? Once you've kind of iterated and optimized. Why do you think these things are such a problem for business owners? And
Yeah.
why do they struggle to fix it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, in terms of the clarity piece, I think the challenge is they're so close to it. Like they're so close to their message, they're so close to their business, they're in it every day. And to them, they look at whether it's their website, their slide deck, their brochure, whatever it might be, or just think about the way they talk and they think, well, that's easy. Like what I do is easy. Everyone's going to get it. How can they not get it? But they forget, as I said earlier, they're the experts. So they're too close to it. And tied to that, to a lack of clarity is a lack of conciseness. So I think particularly in small and medium-sized businesses, we feel we've got to say more. We've got to tell people how smart we are. We've got to pour more stuff into the mix. And that just confuses the hell out of people. And again, big corporates get this. They keep the messaging very simple. Like Nike, what's the tagline? Just do it. Has it changed? No. Apple, for example, their messaging very clean, very clear, very simple. It's normally a 3 to 4 word tagline for a big corporate. So the lack of conciseness is a big problem. I'm always saying to clients, you got to halve the content to double your impact. So strip it out, get rid of the stuff that's just going to confuse people, because that will stand between you and a client, or you and a referral partner. It'll just confuse them. So that's why they find lack of clarity, I think, a challenge. Lack of consistency, I'll give you a much shorter answer there. It's what I sort of said earlier. Hey, I've got to come up with something new and different, and people feel the pressure of that. And the thing I mentioned at a presentation this morning to about 40 people was, when you think they've got it, they're only just starting to understand it. So people will change their messaging way too common because they think, oh, that's simple. They're going to get it. I've got to come up with something new next week. Well, no, you don't. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And not pitching the problems. I think business owners find that hard because that can feel a little bit confronting, perhaps, or a little bit different, a hard way to talk about the solution. But to say, for example, look, here are the problems that we solve. X, Y, Z, and you list out, for example, the external problems or the result problems that you can solve, and also the negative feelings that you can remove, via the delivery of your service. And that's not normal and natural for people, but it is important they talk about the negative emotions that they remove with the delivery of their service, because as you know, a lot of people buy based on emotion and then justify with logic. So you've got to get into the emotions of it.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to see that when you talk to people's problems, they immediately assume that you have the solution to those problems. So it's a really powerful force to motivate people to take action. And I know as an expert, we can often be guilty of giving too much away. And that is so easy to do when we start talking about the solutions. And that's a lot of the hard part. So the next part to this is really the sales process, right? I've met very few business owners who want to be associated with the idea of being a salesperson. So, mate, with this kind of foundational work that you do, how does that potentially help or remove friction in the sales process for the businesses that you work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first point is mindset, because it's very hard to be good at something that you're not comfortable doing. So, if we have a negative perception of selling, and we might think, for example, and I'm just going to use an old stereotype here, if we think, of selling as being that used car salesman on Parramatta Road that ripped me off 10 years ago, and that's our perception of what selling is, and then, someone then says to you, oh, you're in sales, Jackson, like you're going to fight that. Like you're not comfortable with that. So the first thing is the mindset. And whenever I deliver workshops, I'm always in rooms of people who hate the word selling, hate the word sales, would never call themselves a salesperson. And so one of the first things, if not the first thing we address is how they think and feel about it. And the way I think and feel about it is, selling done well is really the highest form of customer service that there is, because you're really saying to someone, hey, you're at point A, I understand where you're at. You're at point B, this is the outcome you want to achieve. And here are all these roadblocks in the middle. And then you're quickly assessing, do we have a solution that can help you go from point A to point B? And so, I think a lot of people overcomplicate selling. because there's a lot of noise in their heads about it. But it's really actually simple. It's a transformation process. You're helping someone to avoid a problem and gain an outcome, in effect. And just quickly tied to that, Dan Pink wrote a good book, I think roughly back in about 2014. I mean, he's written multiple books, New York Times bestseller, the whole thing. But his book was called To Sell is Human. And there's really good research in there where I think they tracked roughly 9,047 people over a year. And these people didn't have founder or CEO or business development manager in their title. So they're in non-sales roles. And they found out that they actually spent, I can't remember the exact stat, but it was something in the vicinity of about 46 to 48% of their week convincing, persuading, influencing others. Now, no money exchange hands, but they were nonetheless persuading, influencing, convincing. Now, if you've got a partner or if you've got kids or if you've got friends, you know that you're doing that. How about we see this movie or go to this restaurant or whatever? We do it without thinking about it. So the point being, we're doing it all the time anyway, which is that sometimes the pressure and the feeling around it changes when money's involved.
Yes.
So going through that sort of conversation and that process just lightens the load for people and makes them feel like, oh, I'm actually helping people. We're not trying to push something down someone's throat. That's not what we're about. It's the push-free pitch, and it's, the streamlined selling where you quickly qualify in or out. And if you can serve them, do it. If you can't, tell them early.
It makes so much sense, and I resonate with this so much. Like in my early career, my first role was as a trainee financial advisor in a place called the Financial Advice Center. And if you can visualize the Wolf of Wall Street, it was basically the only thing that wasn't there was the midget throwing, honestly. And it was just
You're in the
toxic.
boiler room.
Exactly. It was really, really toxic. And I
Yeah.
hated it. I almost quit. And that was like my first experience in terms of this high pressure sales environment. And it stuck with me for a long time throughout my career that I was really fearful of selling because I never wanted to be perceived being one of those kinds of people. But when someone like yourself said something very similar, like, Jackson, you need to sell every single day of your life. And if you're not selling, you're not living your dream, you're fulfilling somebody else's. And then I go, okay, wow, I need to get good at this skill set of persuading and convincing people of my perspective, and then playing the role of the tour guide of how do I help guide them to the destination as seamlessly and effortlessly as possible and as enjoyably as possible, so we can make a decision that benefits everyone. And it changed everything for me. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those penny drop moments in your time, mate.
Yeah, look, I like what you said there because it really is about playing the guide, if you like, or yes, certainly the trusted expert, but rather than, pitching or communicating your expertise too overtly and pushing that, it's more about the guide, about saying, look, I've been in these situations before with clients. Here's what I see. Here's some challenges. Here's how we can help. If it feels like a fit, great. If it doesn't, that's fine as well. And it's playing the guide to effectively, help that person save time, save money, avoid the mistakes. And you're doing that person a service. Like I really do feel done right. Obviously, it's the highest form of customer service there is, and being super clear about that messaging again, because all the messaging and the sales process should always be constructed with the end prospect in mind and making it as simple, as clear, and as easy as possible for them. And I think prospects get frustrated because too many people in sales try to bamboozle them with a bunch of crap, and it's frustrating. I know a number of times I've said to service providers, I've literally said to them, Jackson, I am trying to give you money, but you are making it hard for me. I literally want to engage with what you've got to offer, but at the moment, I'm going to put you in the too hard basket if we can't, change what we're talking about here because you're making me work too hard, and we don't want to make prospects work too hard. It could be too much content on the website or the process doesn't work, whatever.
I think that's a great reminder for all of us. So guys, if you're listening and watching this, go and ask yourself the question, where are you making the process too hard for your ideal clients to make you money in your process? Because I think that's a really great reminder to try and simplify it and make it more enjoyable, which is fantastic. So mate, assuming that we've got this kind of foundational work done around the positioning, the messaging, we've got the consistency, we've built this kind of seamless sales process around being the guide. What happens next typically when you work with clients? What's the next step?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'll just quickly talk about positioning really briefly, if that's okay, because I think that's an important topic in that. Positioning is often misunderstood. Like people hear position, I think about brand positioning. So the outcomes of that positioning, it might be the collateral or the tagline or the logo, and that's not positioning. And a lot of people, I think, get it wrong. And the question to ask yourself is, how am I uniquely qualified to add more value than competitors in a way that my ideal client cares a lot about. So there's really three things I said there. I know that's long, so I'll try to make it really succinct. So it's, that unique qualification, like what's different about you, and that's only one piece of it. It's then thinking about how does that solve a bigger problem for people than my competitors can solve. And when you talk about that, you're talking about the customer experience, the product design, anything that solves a problem better, faster, cheaper, for example, than your competitors do. And obviously in a way that that the ideal client cares a lot about. And very briefly on that, Jackson, I heard a good story, or as a good story the other day, where Reed Hastings, obviously one of the founders of Netflix, he went to Blockbuster, got frustrated by the late fees, and he went, I hate this. I'm not going to put up with this. And then lo and behold, we all know what happened to Blockbuster and what's happened to Netflix. So it's finding that problem and solving it in a way better than the existing providers do. And that's positioning. And I just mentioned that briefly because, that is the ultimate outcome of the of clear messaging, of great marketing, of a sales process and a referral strategy that works. It's having that positioning in the market so people know who you are and they're coming to you, and energetically that feels great.
I love that. And we refer to it in our world as the signature solution. Of essentially, how do we articulate that? But just playing devil's advocate here, there are lots of people out there who, like, maybe they're not deep in their career. Maybe they're not an expert. Maybe they don't necessarily have proof in the world that they may perceive as being black and white unique. So considering that, how have you potentially helped clients who maybe don't feel that they're best in their market or don't really think that they're overtly unique or doing anything crazily different to nail that positioning? Is it even possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, there's different ways of expressing credibility and also points of difference. So I think when you're close to it, it is hard, and the common thought can often be, well, for example, I'm a lawyer, I'm a financial planner, or I'm an accountant. Like, how are we different? But if you lift the bonnet and dig deep enough, you can normally find something. Now, it could be around their product, their solution, their process. So you look at the whole client experience from go to woe, and there's normally something in there that stands out as being a little bit different. So yes, you've got to look closely at it, particularly in those industries where there's a lot of competitors and a lot of noise. And the other thing I'd say in terms of positioning is it's not just about what you do internally that can make you different. It's who do you do it for? And a common, as you would know, obviously, with your experience and businesses you've come across, a common mistake is, you hear people say this all the time at events. Oh, if you hear of anyone who, or if you know of anyone who, then, refer them to me. And it's like, really? You're after everyone or anyone? Don't say that, because when people hear that, their brains think of no one. So part of the positioning piece is not just your level of expertise and credibility and what you've got internally and the runs on the board, but who do you do it for? And if you're niche enough in who you do it for, the trick I think here is to understand that niche market's problems better than they do. And so even if you don't have a lot of experience, you can pick a small niche market, quickly learn what their problems are, and that can certainly help with positioning. I mean, I know when I started my business, I'm sorry, the danger of self-referencing, when I started Customer Return, that was in 2010. And long story short, I was thinking, well, who's my niche market? And I kept on seeing in the media, you mentioned financial advisors before, this was not that long at the back of the GFC, and financial advisors were getting a tough time in the press because there've been a few corporate collapses, inappropriate products being recommended, et cetera, et cetera. And the three challenges they had were lack of client feedback, so they weren't getting client feedback. Their value proposition or pitch wasn't great, which is why roughly only 16 to 18% of Australians engage a financial planner. And they wanted referrals, but they weren't getting one referral per client per year. And so I thought, okay, so that's the niche market, that's their problems, their three big problems. And so what I did was just niched into that industry and design the products around that. A product around feedback, a product around referrals, and a product around value proposition. And so that was my market. And they were my three products, just off the back of where the heat was, where the problems were specifically. And I started doing, free presentations for the industry associations, like the Financial Planners Association. So even if you don't have any experience, like, that is a way to do it. Like, look for the problems, look for where your skill set is, and match that to the products and go from there.
Love it. Fantastic, mate. That's
Sorry,
great
mate,
advice.
long answer to a short question.
It's really important though, because I see so many business owners really just struggle with doing this and struggle with making the decision to niche because they do want to help everyone. And as a result of trying to help everyone, they end up helping no one.
Yeah.
And it sounds counterintuitive, but the more niche you are, the more successful you will be because you're just far better at attracting those kinds of people. Because if you got the choice of working with a generalist or a specialist, you typically are always going to choose the specialist every time. And so I think it's important that we spend more time on this. So guys, make the decision. And the interesting thing is, if you pick a niche, it doesn't need to be your niche forever. Just commit to it for 3 months, 6 months. And then at the end of that 3 or 6 months, if you feel like it's not adding value or it's not the right niche, pivot. It's not that hard. So Nathan, let's talk a little bit about your offer and how you work with your clients. Do you want to give us a little bit of a crash course on how you work with people, what an ideal client looks like for you, and so that people can get a little bit more insight around what potentially working with you could look like? Unfortunately, guys, we had Nathan have some internet issues, so he's just dropped out at the end. So I figure I will do the outro on his behalf. Hopefully, I do it justice. So, guys, we've covered off a whole heap of insights around how do you clarify your message, how do you feel more confident in your sales process, so you actually believe in the process that you're going through and what you're actually selling, and how do you ultimately win more clients, retain those clients, and get those clients to refer like crazy. Nathan's an absolute expert of this area, as you can see from this particular podcast, and there's a high value. Nathan can assist in terms of consulting, workshops, and training programs to help you dial this into your business. So if you'd like to find out more about Nathan's value proposition and how he might be able to assist you, make sure that you go to customerreturn.com.au. We'll include all of the details in the show notes. And as always, guys, a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into practice. So make sure that you take some of the golden nuggets that you've heard on today's show, go and implement them and report back to us and let us know how you go. This has been another episode of the Financial Freedom Secrets Show, and look forward to catching you next time.